Hey, this is Yazuki Wolf, and today I'm going to be resurrecting one of my old series. It's called Japan Quest. And now I kind of let this series kind of die out after a while because the original goal of the series was to sort of catalog the events of my life coming to Japan and going to a manga school, and then eventually searching for a job as a game designer, and eventually getting my job as a game designer. And once it kind of had caught up with my current day, I didn't really feel like I knew what to do with it anymore because it kind of had lost its momentum of where it was heading toward. And so I kind of just let it die off for a while. But then I realized that there are a lot of stories that I never actually told you guys about, just things that happened to me in Japan. And there's probably a lot of little insights I could give. If anything that you guys are interested in, you have questions about, I could probably talk about. So I decided to resurrect that to just kind of give you simple stories of my experiences here in Japan. And eventually I'd like to move on to sort of do interviews with other people who have come to Japan and fulfilled their dreams here in the land of the rising sun. So for today's episode, just have a very simple topic, and that is retail jobs in Japan. So that's not like your English teaching job, or like nothing to do with manga or game design. It's just the sort of the normal jobs that people do with customer service, retail jobs in Japan, and how that is different than in the States. So first off, why would I want to do retail jobs? Because, as an English-speaking native, a native English speaker, it's a lot easier for you to just get a job as an English teacher, and it pays a lot. It pays probably 2 to 3 times as much as well, maybe even 4 times, depending on where you teach. And so that's the easiest job to get as a foreigner just coming in if you speak English natively. But I definitely had done those jobs as well. But I felt that when I was working those jobs, you were sort of like a representative of your home country more so than you are participating in the Japanese culture. And I really came to Japan to learn Japanese culture and to kind of get as much out of becoming part of the culture as I could. And I felt that there was a wall, sort of, as long as I was just the English teacher, because as the English teacher, you're not supposed to use Japanese as much as possible. You're supposed to speak in English. You're supposed to just kind of, it's a completely different ballpark. I wanted to get the feeling of what it's like to just work as the same type of jobs that because at that time I had been actually going to the manga school, and so a lot of my classmates were 21-year-old kids in school, and I wanted to kind of have the same experiences as them. I heard when I was in the States that some people would tell me, like, everyone should probably work a retail job at some point in their life because it teaches you a lot about interacting with other people and just kind of work ethics that I think it would be beneficial for me to do that in Japan as well, to understand sort of those roots of the Japanese culture, of what it's like working in those regular retail jobs. And so I looked around for jobs for a while. There's some places that I really like Book Off, because I love going there to just I used to buy a lot of manga from there for cheap prices, and I could sell them back to similar stores. And I also like manga cafes, so I went to look at places like that. But unfortunately, a lot of the places you'll go to in Japan will straight up tell you right off the bat, no foreigners allowed. So it's not unusual to be rejected just because you're not Japanese. So that may be a little bit shocking at first, but that's just sort of the culture here. You run into the same issues when you're looking for places to live at. There's a lot of apartments that just will not rent to foreigners. So there is sort of you kind of have to have a thick enough skin to have a little bit of rejection. And the other thing I would say is that if you aren't really good, or at least strongly fluent in Japanese, it's going to be very, very difficult to work a regular retail job. And in that case, maybe you should just stick with the English teaching or something like that, some sort of equivalent for the time being. But because the first hurdle so the first thing is when they look at your face, they're going to decide, okay, do I want to have a foreigner or not to have a foreigner? Are they open to that idea or not? And even if they're open to the idea, the next hurdle is the language barrier, because if you can't speak the language fluently, then they're going to be like, it's not going to work. So the next thing you have to do is you really have to prove that you can speak the language. So when you go in and ask for the interview, you have to be very, confident in the way that you speak, and just speak directly in Japanese and show them that you're not just saying like, watashi no namae wa. No, you have to actually show them like, okay, this guy actually has some familiarity with the language, and he can handle things. And then, so that's the second barrier. And after that, it's pretty easy after that. I mean, if you could show, because a lot of times they'll be really impressed if you could speak Japanese. That will impress them enough to kind of maybe even shoot you up above just regular Japanese applicants, because it shows that you have that sort of, you're not just someone who's looking for a 9 to 5 job and doesn't have any skills per se. You've already proven that you at least have the skills to learn a new language. So I mean that I imagine that does give you some positives there. So then once you get in, what is it like once you're in there? And so the job that I eventually ended up getting was I worked at Mr. Donuts, which is a donut store in Japan. I think it actually was originally from America, but I'm not sure. I never actually saw it in my home state. So, but it's a fairly standard like Dunkin' Donuts type of retail shop where you sell donuts. And my first impression that was kind of interesting is that you know how when you go to your orientation for your standard like retail job in the States or possibly in other countries as well, but at least in my experience in the States, they give you an orientation where they give you like this manual and they tell you like all these steps of how you're supposed to handle the customers and everything. And we all kind of took that as like a guide, and we would just kind of look over it and be like, okay, though this kind of makes this is a fairly we get where they're coming from, but we're not going to go that far out of our way to follow this word for word, you know. In Japan, they actually do follow it word for word. It's like, this is the manual and this is how you're supposed to do things. And they're very strict about following those things. And like, especially the words that you have to say. And this was something that was really good, real positive for me for being in a Japanese retail shop, is that for the first time I was actually forced to use keigo, which is the kind of honorific form of Japanese where you're speaking very politely, because as a foreigner in Japan, most people won't expect you to be able to use keigo. So if you just use teinego, which is the mas form, if you're familiar, like instead of saying iku, you say ikimasu, you know, that's the teinego. I'm sorry. But if you could just do that much, most people are fine with that, and they never expect you to say to go beyond that. But when you work in a retail shop, the customer is your honored guest, so you actually have to use honorific forms. So, for example, see if I can think of an example. Well, for example, like instead of using des, you might have to say de gozaimasu. So if you're saying like if you're giving someone some like cafe ole or something, right? Instead of saying cafe ole des, you have to say cafe ole de gozaimasu. You know, you have to have that. And another thing is like when you're passing people down, if you're passing by someone, you can't just say sumimasen. You have to say shitsurei itashimasu. And like maybe if you it's kind of a tongue twister sometimes. Like I remember what was the one that always used to flip me up? It was when I don't know. It's been so long since I worked there. I can't remember the exact phrases, but there's a lot of things where you have like sasete itadakimasu, and it's just a lot of like very short words, short sounds all linked together, and it gets kind of easy to get tongue twisted. So that's actually another reason why when you work retail jobs, a lot of people, they actually practice in the morning of how to say each of the lines. They'll say it in the back room. They'll say all the lines and before they actually go out in front to actually talk to people. And other things, when people come in, you have to say irashaimase. And people, if you live in Japan, you hear that all the time when you go into stores. I was always saying irashaimase, which just basically means welcome. And you don't have to reply to that or anything. When I first came to Japan, I kind of felt like I had to reply when people said that, but it's not something you would necessarily reply to. It's just them kind of announcing that they're nearby in case you need help. And at Mr. Donuts, we had to actually announce every item that the customer was getting. So like they would tell us what they want, and then we would pick it up with our they're not pliers, what are they called? You know, whatever the things are called that you use to sanitarily pick up items from a display. We would be grabbing those, and then we'll be announcing like what it is that they had ordered. So you have to memorize all the names of the different donuts. So if there's like golden chocolate, or like what else did they have? Like it's been a long time. Like French shikura, I think. Like there's a bunch of different things. You have to memorize all those. That was the hardest thing at first. Is you actually have to memorize all of them, because when they order, you have to actually confirm their order and pick it up with your hand and put it on the tray, and then you put those together into the you put those all together, and you ask them if it's going to be for here or to go. It's like how is it the way that we said it? Like kochire o meshigarimasu ka? Like as if you're going to be eating here, or it's mochikairi is to take out. So even that right there, those are fairly big words to use in Japanese that you don't necessarily use regularly. And then like once you receive once you've gotten the order and you have the total, like in America, a lot of times I noticed that in retail shops, sometimes they don't even tell you what the total is. They're just like, oh yeah, just give me the money. Like it says on the display there or whatever. But like there you have to specifically say like, okaike wa not a cent, say it's like 2050 yen or something. It'd be "Okaike wa 2050 yen de gozaimasu." And once again, it's like "de gozaimasu." You can't say "des," you know. So it's different than what you learn in Japanese school, where you're learning, if you're just learning Japanese to get by, they generally aren't teaching you the really polite, the really formal forms. And it's just the bare minimum polite form. So working in the retail job really forces you to learn the actual keigo. And if you're not familiar what keigo is, it's the honorific forms where you use honorable words to speak about about people outside, about other people, so that you're raising them up, and you use like humble forms of words to that are referring to yourself to lower yourself down. So it's like it's raising them and lowering you in the speech patterns, and that's the higher. Whereas teinego, that's just the normal polite form, is just equally polite. It's just you're speaking politely to them. Whereas, and then you have the friendly language, like the colloquial, I guess, that you would use for just with your friends. And so there's many layers to the politeness in Japanese. And generally for foreigners, like I said, if you just have the minimum, then you're okay. But in the retail shop, you have to go beyond that. And I think it's really good for later on in life. Like this came in handy for me when I was meeting my girlfriend, now wife's mother, and things like that, where you want to be specifically polite and not just like bare minimally polite. So then just like, for example, you get the orders, the "Okaike wa 2300 yen de gozaimasu," or whatever. And then when they pay with, say, if they paid with 5,000 yen, what do you call that? Note, I guess. You can't just take that and then give it back. You have to, once again, you have to speak and say, sorry. I just say, "Gosen o otsukare itashimasu," or "otsukare shimasu," I think. I don't remember if they put the itashimasu in there or not. But so like, once again, it's formally saying, like, I am receiving this 5,000 yen, and I'm going to be taking care of this, putting it in here, and now I'm going to return you whatever. Let's say if it's like, maybe I'm not going to do the math off the fly, but say it's like 2,500 yen back. You'd be like, "2500 yen no kaishi." Is it how? Oh, I think it's a tashimasu in that place. So big. 2500 yen o kaishi itashimasu. So once again, the regular verb kaisu is to return. So kaesu, kaisu. And that's the informal. So that's not even polite. So then if you want to say polite, it would be a kaishimasu is polite. But we're going beyond that. We're actually raising them up. We're lowering it. It's the humbling form. It's something we're doing. So we're returning it. So we say, "O kaishi tashimasu," or "O kaishi shimasu," and that's gonna. And this isn't a language lesson. And if you're interested, I will do a language lesson talking specifically about how examples of how formal speech is made in Japanese. But that's probably beyond the scope of this video. But at any rate, let's just say that you learn a lot of really formal Japanese in that setting, which is really useful later on if you want to like pursue a long-term life here in Japan. If you're just here for a holiday, you don't have to worry about it. Just use the mas form, and no one will hold that against you. But I found it really rewarding in that it taught me how to speak in a more formal way, and also it gave me just the experience of working with other Japanese, like young Japanese and like older Japanese who are just working regular retail jobs, and I'm going through that same experience with them. And I actually made some of my best friendships during that time, because after work we would all go out, and we would we went and saw fireworks together one time. We would go on like drives, because a lot of the kids, they were just getting like their first driver's license, so they want to like go out and drive places. So we would like drive around and like we would go to like movies together and things like that. And I didn't really get that outside of there, because when you are just an English teacher, there's, like I said, there's that wall between you and the Japanese people who are there, because you're the English teacher. You're a kind of a separate category. Whereas when I was working retail, like I was just another guy that was doing the night shift with the other people. And like, so after the shift was over, like, hey, let's go do this, let's go do that. And, it was really cool. And I even keep in touch with some of those people even now, and really appreciate the time that we had there. So I do highly recommend, if you are in Japan and you definitely pick up some ability with the language first, but once you feel fairly comfortable, try out some retail jobs. They don't pay as much as English teaching, but I think you get the reward back in other ways. So that's all for this video. Till next time, yoroshiku.